My parents and sister's family went to Mexico with me. At the airport I froze. My passport? Panicking, I looked around. My mother smirked. Oh, no passport? Guess you're not going home, lol. My sister giggled, my father scoffed. Oh well, only real family is going back. They laughed and walked through the gate. But when they got home, a nightmare awaited them. Maggie's heart pounded as she stood in the bustling airport terminal. Her family, her parents, her sister Amy, and the rest of the Walker clan, had just boarded a flight to Mexico without her. In a panic, she rifled through her bag at the check-in counter. Her eyes widened as she realized her passport was missing. Across the terminal, her mother smirked and teased. Oh no, passport. Guess you're not going home. Amy giggled and her father simply scoffed, remarking, well, only real family gets to go back. They laughed and strode through the gate, leaving Maggie frozen in disbelief. Back in Phoenix on a scorching Sunday afternoon, Maggie arrived at her parents' stately home in an upscale Paradise Valley neighborhood. The dry desert wind tugged at her shoulder-length brown hair as she wiped sweat from her forehead and clutched the bottle of wine she'd brought for their regular family dinner. The grand house, nestled among neatly lined palm trees, still held its dignified charm. With a deep sigh, she rang the doorbell. Her mother, Susan, opened the door, impeccably made up and dressed elegantly, as if she were posing for a social media shot. Behind large windows showcasing a meticulously styled desert garden, Susan greeted her coolly. You're late. Everyone's been waiting. Amy and her family are already here. Maggie offered an apologetic smile as she stepped into the living room. The plush Persian carpet cushioned her every step, while the walls were adorned with perfectly staged Walker family photos. Weddings, graduations, and milestones from Amy's daughter Sarah's life. Images crafted for Instagram perfection. Amy waved from the white leather sofa, cradling 8-year-old Sarah, while her husband, Greg, sat nearby in his signature overpriced polo. Even though her father, David, barely looked up from his newspaper, his steady gaze behind his reading glasses conveyed a quiet, teacher-like approval. As the family conversation flowed, with Amy boasting about her new yoga studio and Susan recounting the latest community events, the topic shifted abruptly. Hey Maggie, Amy said, her tone casual yet etched with certainty. Remember that Mexico trip we joked about last month? You promised to pay for all of us. The whole family's going to Cancun. Her voice carried a tone of assured victory, as if an all-inclusive resort was an inevitable family tradition. Susan chimed in dreamily. And don't forget your golf clubs, David. I've heard the courses there are wonderful. Maggie's heart sank. Internally, she knew that such a trip would dent her savings significantly, but she forced a small nod as she sipped her deep red wine, feeling the weight of her family's expectations. That morning in Phoenix had started early at 7 a.m. at Morning Glory, a popular restaurant with a spacious terrace that Susan had chosen to beat the heat. The table was arranged as if for a photo shoot, with sunlight streaming through the windows and the aroma of eggs Benedict filling the air. As the family gathered, Amy, with exaggerated concern, asked, Sis, did you remember to bring your passport? Maggie, still groggy from a sleepless night spent triple-checking her luggage, replied wearily, Once it's fine. Her passport was safely tucked in her expensive leather shoulder bag, until her mother's eyes fell on it. Oh, that new bag is lovely, Susan cooed, studying Maggie's bag intently. I need to use the restroom. Why don't you leave your bag here? No one will take it. Maggie didn't think much of it and set her bag on the table before heading inside. What happened next was captured by the restaurant's security cameras. While sipping her coffee, Susan casually scanned the room, then smoothly reached into Maggie's bag. In less than 10 seconds, she removed the blue-covered passport and tucked it into her own handbag. Amy offered a faint, knowing smile, while David pretended not to notice behind his newspaper. Even little Sarah tilted her head in innocent confusion, as if wondering why Grandma was acting so oddly. Later, in the car on the way to the airport, Maggie felt increasingly uneasy. Her family's conversation was strangely superficial, Susan and Amy were unusually chipper, and even David's indifference felt deliberate. At Phoenix Sky Harbor International Airport, when the check-in agent called, Passport, please, Maggie's calm search through her bag turned frantic. Her wallet, smartphone, makeup pouch. All were there, but her passport was gone. Her voice began to shake as she called out, It's not here. Susan's voice carried a hint of amusement. My passport? I can't find it. When Maggie's eyes met hers, Susan covered her mouth and laughed softly. Oh, you don't have it. The agent's voice echoed. You can't come then, can you? Amy giggled. Sis, how careless of you. And David snorted as Susan turned back to the counter saying, We'll be going ahead. Maggie's heart shattered as she heard her mother declare, We're going with just the real family. Their backs retreated toward the departure gate, their cheerful laughter and indifference stinging Maggie deeply. Standing frozen amid the airport bustle, the morning's events replayed in her mind, the staged behavior at breakfast, her mother's calculated smile, David's hidden expression behind the newspaper. Maggie's hands trembled with a cocktail of anger, sadness, and fear, but slowly, her accountant's rationality returned. She remembered that her smartphone had recorded every moment, and the security cameras would show the truth. Let's end this, she whispered to herself as the light streaming through the airport windows bolstered her resolve. After leaving the airport, Maggie returned to Morning Glory, the same restaurant from breakfast, parking her car among luxury vehicles. She checked her reflection in the rearview mirror. Her puffy eyes betrayed a sleepless night. At 11 a.m., during the lull between breakfast and lunch, she requested a meeting with the manager, Janet Morrison. "Please, I'd like to review the security camera footage from around 7 a.m., Maggie said calmly. There was a passport theft. Janet's warm smile faded as Maggie explained that her mother had stolen her passport, leaving her stranded with her family bound for Cancun without her. Janet's eyes widened at the mention of the Walker family, well-known figures in Paradise Valley. "Please wait a moment," Janet replied. In the security monitoring room, the footage played clearly on a blue-tinted screen. Maggie photographed the screen and jotted down detailed notes before Janet nodded silently. Next, Maggie visited the local police station to file a report and preserve the evidence. "I have audio recordings too," she informed Officer Thompson as she presented her smartphone with recordings from breakfast and the airport. "The security footage shows the passport theft." Officer Thompson's expression grew serious. "Passport theft is a serious crime, especially when international travel is involved. We'll keep your family under surveillance until they return, likely in a week." Leaving the station, Maggie drove to the Phoenix Ritz-Carlton to gather her thoughts. Returning home would no doubt trigger a barrage of calls from her parents, so she needed time and space. In her new apartment's top-floor balcony, she gazed out over the city as the sunset painted the desert red. Opening her laptop, she saw a letter of apology from her mother. A brief note reading, "My beloved daughter, I just wanted you to reflect a little, always putting family last." The sound of her clicking delete echoed in the quiet room. Her smartphone showed 20 unread messages from her sister, which she promptly deleted without reading. "Let's end this," Maggie murmured again, sipping whiskey as she mapped out her next steps. Legal preparations, financial arrangements, and even new job opportunities to rebuild her life over the coming week. As the crimson sunset sank below the horizon, Maggie's determination burned brighter. Despite the betrayal and the carefully orchestrated manipulation, she resolved to reclaim her independence. Her journey was far from over, but she was ready to write a new chapter, one where she defined her own worth, surrounded by those who truly respected her, and far from the shadows of her family's deceit. That week promised to be long, but for the first time ever Maggie felt no hesitation. She was on the cusp of complete freedom. In the distance, the lights of planes landing at the airport shimmered, and she allowed herself a quiet smile. A full moon hung low over Phoenix, its glow sharpened by the desert's clear air. At 11 p.m., the upscale Paradise Valley neighborhood lay in an eerie hush. 2 police cars sat silently, their lights off, in front of her parents' house, while in nearby homes, curious neighbors watched with bated breath. Shadows flickered behind windows as gossip spread, and in the Walker family's meticulously kept garden, desert plants cast long, haunting silhouettes in the moonlight, reminders of a childhood now long gone. Inside the police car, Officer Thompson's seasoned voice came over the radio, heavy with the sorrow of countless family breakdowns. Maggie exhaled deeply as memories of lonely nights in luxury hotels, glittering city lights from high above, and endless streams of hollow family messages played through her mind. For a moment, her expression twisted with raw emotion. Then she caught her reflection in the rearview mirror and composed herself. "Miss Walker," Officer Thompson said gently, "we've crossed the city limits. As planned, we'll enter through the main gate." Maggie nodded silently. The week she spent at the luxury hotel had restored her calm judgment. Adjusting the hue of her navy blue suit and rechecking her makeup, she reminded herself that perfect grooming was her armor, and her pride as an accountant was her strength now. "Are you ready?" Thompson asked in a motherly tone, honed over a 30-year career that had seen many such family confrontations. "Yes, of course," Maggie replied steadily. Tonight, years of endurance would finally end. Outside, taxi headlights carved a path through the interplay of street trees and shadows as the clock read 11:15 p.m. Thompson's instructions over the radio were precise. Minimal intervention, monitor for psychological impact. The taxi came to a slow stop in front of the house. Tires crunched on gravel, breaking the silence. The door opened and Amy stepped out first, wearing a designer sundress and exuding the polished air of a luxury vacation. Her hair was styled to perfection, and her nails were immaculate, a carefully curated facade of elegance. Next emerged her mother, Susan. Beneath her flawless makeup, a trace of fatigue showed. She carried an expensive travel bag. Her dignified expression belied the nervous glances she cast around. Father David followed silently, methodically unloading luggage from the trunk, though his trembling hands betrayed his inner turmoil. Finally, little Sarah appeared in a Disneyland t-shirt, clutching a stuffed animal that symbolized the fragile hope of the family's future. Then Officer Thompson's voice cut through the night. In the moonlight, the officer stepped forward. Susan's expression froze, and a pallor drained the color from her face. "Is something wrong?" Her voice trembled. David's tone was strained, a shadow of the dignified teacher he once was. We'd like to discuss a passport theft case. Susan's eyes widened, and her expensive handbag nearly slipped from her trembling grasp. Maggie stepped out of the police car, radiating dignity and beauty in the moonlight. Determined to face this moment of liberation from years of oppression in her finest form, she said, "Let's talk," in the living room. Inside, the family gathered on the expensive leather sofa. The same couch that had witnessed countless smiling family moments now served as the setting for a grim legal proceeding. On the large TV screen, decisive security camera footage replayed the instant Susan's hand, with calculated ease, removed Maggie's passport, a natural movement that spoke volumes. Amy's complicit smile, the subtle yet telling indifference in David's eyes behind his newspaper, all were laid bare. Susan's voice trembled as the footage played, her scarf quivering at her neck. Officer Thompson then played a recording from the airport which captured every word. "We'll go with just the real family," Susan had said, echoing cruelly. The recording was irrefutable. Suddenly Amy broke down in tears, her meticulously manicured fingers covering her face as she cried, Always Maggie being perfect. I was always second best." Years of buried jealousy exploded in that moment. David slumped deeply into his leather armchair, staring blankly at the ceiling. His pride as a former teacher, his dignity as head of the family, all crumbled away behind his reading glasses. Empty eyes wandered and Susan's thin, trembling voice murmured, "You always look down on us. Always working, always justifying yourself." Maggie's calm question hung in the air, unanswered, as the power dynamic shifted irrevocably. Little Sarah clutched her mother and asked, "Mama, what's wrong? Grandma, why are you crying?" The child's innocent query made the heaviness of the moment even more acute. Amy, unable to comfort her daughter, continued to sob quietly. Officer Thompson then presented a set of neatly arranged documents from a black binder, a formal announcement of the family's dissolution. Maggie moved to the window, gazing at the garden bathed in silver moonlight. The shadows of the cacti stretched long across the ground. This was not just an ending. It was the start of a new life. In the silent midnight, only the sound of shuffling legal documents punctuated the darkness, while the moonlight softly illuminated their final moments together. 3 months later, twilight draped over Phoenix, its beauty now a stark contrast to the change reflected in Maggie's eyes. The legal settlement had been concluded swiftly despite the gravity of the passport theft. Prosecutors chose not to indict Susan, largely because Maggie had requested leniency in exchange for a settlement. Her mother had transferred $5 million to Maggie's account to settle all ties between them. Yet, money couldn't mend every wound. As a consequence, her parents were forced to abandon their life in the luxurious Paradise Valley neighborhood. Rumors spread through social media, and having lost their standing in the church community, they decided to move to a small suburban town. Susan's precious social circles evaporated, and David's shattered pride led him to resign from his honorary positions on the local education board. Newspapers detailed the sad unraveling of a once respected family. Amy, too, saw her life unravel. She began thrice-weekly psychiatric sessions to address her deep-seated jealousy, and could no longer sustain her glamorous facade. She left the expensive yoga studio, and her social media posts fell silent. Meanwhile, Greg, her husband, discovered the truth about his wife and started contemplating divorce. His reputation in real estate plummeted, and his income dwindled. The most heartbreaking impact was on 8-year-old Sarah, who, amid her parents' discord and Susan's declining mental state, was temporarily taken in by her paternal grandparents, a home that offered little peace in the midst of adult conflicts. Maggie, however, had chosen a new path. She left her position at the Phoenix accounting firm, after receiving a headhunting offer from a major firm in Chicago. Restarting her career in a new city, she found that life there was refreshingly different. The view from her high-rise apartment overlooking Lake Michigan filled her with a sense of freedom, utterly unlike the desert landscape of Phoenix. Though she continued with therapy, acknowledging that she had always just wanted to be loved, the counselor's words occasionally pierced her heart. Yet not all was bleak. Maggie maintained regular video calls with young Sarah. "Auntie, can we meet again when you come to Chicago?" the little girl would ask. "Of course, sweetheart, I'll come visit anytime," Maggie would reply, her smile genuine. Her professional abilities were finally recognized. A partnership and promotion were already on the horizon. A life free from family constraints had unleashed her true potential. Weekend walks along the shores of Lake Michigan, watching the sunset shimmer on the water, became her solace. In quiet moments, Maggie recalled the events in Phoenix, a distant, painful memory that now fueled her resolve. Then one day a letter arrived from Sarah. In childish handwriting overflowing with pure affection, it read, "Dear Auntie, Mommy still isn't well, but I want to be strong like you. Please wait for me someday when I grow up." Maggie clutched the letter to her chest. Tears rolled down her cheeks, not of regret but of bittersweet hope. From her high-rise balcony, she gazed at the city lights as Chicago's wind gently caressed her hair. This is what it means to be truly free, she thought. Her soliloquy carried a hint of pride. Tomorrow would dawn on a life wholly her own. A life unbound by anyone else. The moonlight rippled across the lake, as if blessing the beginning of her new life. Everything had ended, and yet everything was just beginning. In Maggie's eyes, the future shone brighter than ever before.